So I think we're about ready to start our next panel. So please come in and take a seat. Okay. Welcome to When Machines Rock, a celebration of Robert Moog and electronic music. My name is Judith Peraino. I'm a professor of music at Cornell and co-curator of the exhibition Electrifying Music, The Life and Legacy of Robert Moog. This opens directly after this panel. The gallery is located in Carl A. Kroc Hall Library, which is down the long corridor of Olin and down two staircases. And we will also have people leading you through another area, Stimson Hall. So we have volunteers, they'll wave their hands and you can follow one of them to find your way to the exhibition. I want to thank our many generous co-sponsors listed on this slide who made this celebration possible. And there they are. And I especially want to thank members of Robert Moog's family, Ileana Grams Moog and Michelle Moog Krusa, for their participation and support. I also want to thank my co-organizers, Catherine Reagan in the library, Trevor Pinch, Roger Mosley, and Kevin Ernst. In 1957, Robert Moog entered Cornell's graduate program in engineering physics. While a student here, he manufactured and sold theremins and became obsessed with the sonic capabilities of electricity, eventually plotting a way to combine business and research to invent a new type of electronic musical instrument for wide use. Moog's ingenuity in the domain of electronic circuitry and instrument design enabled the ingenuity of musicians who would fulfill the expressive potential of Moog's invention. It's my great honor to introduce one such musician as our keynote speaker, Gary Numan. So to tell you the truth, honor is an understatement. This is one of my wildest dreams come true. I have been a huge fan since I first heard his songs playing in a 1979 moment. I walked into a record shop where the only algorithm was the record store clerk. No, it wasn't the Cars that I heard at first. It was Films from the Same Pleasure Principle album. And indulge me while I play what I first heard of Gary Numan's music. So with this thunderous cascading drum fill, electronic drones, hard-hitting bass guitar octaves, and a synth melody that sounded both ancient and futuristic, I was instantly hooked and transformed. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago where classic rock dominated radio and teenage culture. And so think Led Zeppelin, Bob Seger was really big, REO Speedwagon. So the sound of Numan's voice and music was completely new to me, and it was music that I'd been waiting to hear. I was instantly a fan and was privileged to see the Telecon tour in 1980, just a year after I'd heard his music. Each one of Numan's 22 albums and counting offers an intense exploration of emotional complexity and alienation, often filtered through science fiction and cinematic stories in the tradition of Philip K. Dick, J.G. Ballard, and William S. Burroughs. His lyrics challenge us with dystopian futures, android perspectives, and ethical frailty in the face of religious fanaticism and environmental devastation. Even the upbeat perennial hit Cars poses a deep question about our faith in the machines that pervade our lives. These heady themes are matched in sound by imaginative orchestrations that combine rich synthesized electronic textures with traditional rock instruments and exquisitely creative production. Gary Numan is a musician's musician, and by that I mean musicians of every popular genre cite him as an influence. The list includes industrial and goth rockers, Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson, electro and techno pioneers, Afrika Bambaataa and Juan Atkins, grunge and alternative artists, Courtney Love and Dave Grohl, and indie singer-songwriters, Beck and Stephen Merritt. His records have been sampled by Jay Dilla, Beastie Boys, Basement Jaxx, and he has been name-checked by Prince, Kanye West, Snoop Dogg, and Jack White, among many others. In 2017, Numan received the Ivor Novello Inspiration Award from the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers, and Authors in recognition of his compositional craft and importance to other musicians. It is no exaggeration to say that, like Robert Moog, Gary Numan changed the sound of popular music, full stop. Please welcome Gary Numan.
Just write songs.
He's just right. I know. That's what he's been telling me all afternoon, but it's not true. It is true in very important ways. So we just had a little tour of the Robert Moog exhibition, and I'm wondering if you could maybe reflect on some of your involvement with Moog synthesizers and also anything that was impressive to you in the exhibition.
Well, my introduction to it's Moog, is it?
It is Moog.
Moog.
No. Moog is what we say in this country.
I said that wrong for 42 years, haven't I? My introduction to it, I'd never been a fan of synthesizers at all. The stuff that I'd heard, and no disrespect whatsoever, it just wasn't my thing, was the more prog rocky sort of, all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all very, very clever, but it just didn't work for me. There'd been the more grandiose thing that David Bowie had done with Eno that I did love, but again, not in a way that made me feel I wanted to do it. Kraftwerk had done some things, but that was too machiney. There was no human element to that. So again, it just didn't bring me into it. And so I was not a fan. We'd gone to a studio. This is 78. To record our first album. I was in a three-piece punk band called Tube Army. I was guitar and singer. And we get to the studio, and I went in first to say hello to the man and introduce us, while the other two were unloading the gear from the car. And there was a Mini Moog in the corner. And although I wasn't a big fan of them, I was quite geeky, and so the fact that they had dials and switches, I was quite fascinated. I'd never actually seen a real one in the flesh before. I'd only ever seen them on television. So I said to the man, Mike Kemp, his name was, what it matters, can I have a go? Couldn't play keyboards, I could only barely play guitar. So he said, all right, and he turned it on, and I didn't know how to set them up, so I didn't fiddle with anything, just pressed the key, and the whole room went, oh, fuck, that. Quite literally what I thought. And it was amazing, and the whole room shook, and I just never heard anything like it, and I didn't know they made noises like that. You know, I'd heard things that go doo and all that stuff. You know, none of it was very cool. This thing, the whole room was vibrating, and it was absolutely amazing. And so I carried on playing with it. I didn't help them unload the gear. I just carried on playing with it. Half an hour later, when they was all set up and ready to go, I said, it's all different. this is the thing, this thing here. So over the next few days, I had to very crudely and amateurishly convert my guitar punk songs into pseudo-punk electronic things, you know, and I really was just one finger. I didn't know how to set them up, so I would fiddle until it made another noise that I liked, record that one, and then went back to the record company who were expecting this poppy punk album with this other thing, and they were really unhappy. Really unhappy.
Do you remember the first song that you put the synthesizer to?
Yeah, I think it's called Listen to the Sirens.
Ah, yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think so. And so then the problem I had then was I didn't realize that other people had already been doing this for a while in this way. And what I mean is that Kraftwerk could be doing their thing, but it was all electronic and blah, blah, blah. Because of the way I came into it, I was a conventional band, guitar, bass, drums. And although I replaced most of the guitar, not all of it, but most of it, the synthesizer was added to a conventional lineup. And so there were certain things that were familiar about it and certain things that were novel, unusual about it. And I thought this mix, I thought I'd discovered it. And I hadn't, by years, by years. But I was so ignorant, I got Asperger's. I didn't go out a lot. I just sat at home and did my little things. So I wasn't very worldly in anything, but especially music. So I didn't know much about what other people were doing. I didn't know that Human League were up in Sheffield doing their thing and had been for a while. Or that Orchestral Manoeuvres were in Liverpool doing their thing. I didn't know about them, so I thought I was the only one. So I went back to the record company who didn't like the record and then had to try to convince them that this was going to be not that album necessarily, but this instrument will be massive. And I have a chance of being at the front end of something. Mm-hmm. And so we had this horrible argument, actually. It was really unpleasant. And they didn't see it at all. I was absolutely convinced and passionate about it. So it was the only thing for me at that point. And it was so silly. I mean, I'm not a fighty person at all. I'm too small. But it got so silly at one point that one of the directors, I forgot his name, whatever, stood up and was going to punch me. So I'm going to go back at him. Nearly had a fist fight over whether this album should come out or not in the office of the record company.
No, that's punk.
And it got that mental. And it was at that point that Martin Mills, who was the other director, sort of intervened and said, well, let's go with it then and see what happens. And 6 months later, I had another album out that got to #1, and it was all good. Mm.
So
and Nick was happy. Oh, okay, ta-da.
Okay, maybe we can get
Can you turn me up, please?
Yeah. Your mic is off. All right, we'll struggle through. Technology, of course, is always a challenge. So we borrowed the name When Machines Rock from one of your songs, When the Machines Rock.
Yeah.
And at one point you had in mind to actually use that as a coinage of sorts. At least I'm remembering in your autobiography, you thought about machine rock as something you wanted to try to spread far and wide. But
I wanted electronic music to be called machine rock. That's what the label I wanted for it. And so I thought if I write a song called When the Machines Rock, someone would pick up on that, and they didn't. Mm-hmm. They called it synth pop, which sucks. Well, it's synth pop or machine rock, you know.
Right. So it's a macho thing, the machine.
No, well, yeah.
Maybe a
little bit. I just thought it sounded great. I think synth pop sounds not great. Don't like it. I still say synth pop now. It still annoys me.
I'll try not to here.
Are you good? Machine rock. This is great.
See, there. I anticipated. So one of the things that I think actually is quite synergistic between you and Robert Moog is you both very early on had a pure ambition for what you wanted to do. He knew he wanted to tinker around with electronic sound and make these instruments, and he almost didn't graduate from Cornell, not writing his dissertation because he was constructing these things. And now you also, at a very early age, said, I want to be a pop star. Can you tell us about that and that ambition and how it has carried through for you and thinking about your approach to these new sounds?
Well, my interest in music goes back to when I was very, very small. And that was, my mum and dad were playing records, and I loved them, and I would listen to them. And one day I was watching something on television. I think it was Hank Marvin, the Cliff Richard. I don't know if you even know them here, but the Shadows are a band in the 60s. And Hank Marvin used to play an electric guitar, and he had switches and buttons, so I thought that was cool. So I always wanted an electric guitar. And then many, many years later, that interest stayed, sort of listening to music, but not really playing. I used to play an acoustic guitar a bit, but I was never really sort of massively into it. And then my mum and dad got me an electric guitar, but I never really played it that way. I would stand it up in front of me, and I'd have lots of pedals coming off of it, around it, and I would hit it and then twiddle until it made all these weird sounds. And so I'm not a musician. I like noises, sounds. The synthesizer just did all of that really easily. It did the same thing, but it's all in one neat little package. My fascination with music is more how you can make unusual sounds or interesting sounds musical. And I think that's where I overlap with Robert a bit, in that the interest is more sound than it is music. Music just happens to be the vehicle that I can put all those sounds in, and it's given me a life. But it's the sounds that I'm most interested in. And luckily, I'm quite good at writing tunes. So you put those two things together, and you've got songs, really. But I'm not a musician. I really couldn't. I would not get a job in someone else's band as a player. I really wouldn't. In fact, I did fail. You know that band called The Jam?
Oh, yeah.
Paul Weller? I failed an audition for The Jam. I did. I didn't know they were The Jam then. I saw it later on the telly. Yeah. That's the band I failed for. Because I turned up with my guitar and all my stuff and just started wailing away and doing all these weird noises and shit. And that wasn't what he wanted at all, Mr. Weller. He wanted, proper playing. Can't do that. I can play just well enough to write tunes. And that's it.
Early on, you were a fan of T-Rex. I think we're going to...
Okay.
All right. Them to hear you. You were a fan of T-Rex, Mark Bolan, early on. Is that right?
Yeah, massive, yeah.
And what was it like? Can you tell us about sort of Gary Numan, the fan, a young fan? What was it about him and that music that really caught your attention?
It's difficult to say, really, because it's such a, you like something or you don't. It touches a part of you or it doesn't. So I really loved the music. I loved his personality and character. The lyrics were completely mental, but nonetheless, I thought they were fun. But it was as much a lifestyle thing that he projected that I really got sucked into, and it was arguably more that than a love of music that really wanted me to go that way. It just seemed to be having such a really good time, a really good life, and I just thought, what better thing can there be to be making music, to be being able to live a life that you choose rather than one that just you end up with, and then you have that lifestyle with it. It just seemed to be a perfect life in a box, and so I went for it. But I did think that the way that he played, the sort of songs that he wrote were very different for a guitar-based band. Had quite an unusual approach to what he did, and I really appreciated that, admired that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to change the slide here. This is one of your big selling albums very early on that sort of put you on the map.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask about the sort of complete package, because you say you're not a musician, but some of us may not believe you. But on the other hand, you also had this total vision, it seemed to me, with what you were doing in terms of the look and the lyrics and the sound world that you were creating. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit about how you were conceiving of this particular album as it comes out with these new sounds and the look that you were putting together and the stories you were trying to create.
It's with this album in particular, it started out as short stories. It wasn't music at all. I was writing a collection of short stories based on what I thought London might become in the next 20, 30, 50 years. And that all started from a newspaper article that I read where there was a particular gang at one point, this must be late 70s, that were going onto the underground trains in London. They would just get off at any random station and beat up anyone that was there, get back on the train and keep on going again. And that's where the Tewkesbury Army name comes from. I'm not sure if that was in the article or whether I thought of that after reading it. I can't remember now. But that started to make me think about the state of humanity and where we were going. And so I started to think, well, you know, how could you fix that? What would you do to fix that? And I'm really young. I don't know, 17, 18, I'm not sure now. But that's where it came from. So I'd written all these stories. And while that was happening, so the music thing that started to happen, I'd found the synthesizer. I made that first album. And then in the months that followed, I got my contract. So I started to convert those stories into lyrics and fit them with the music. The way I write, I do the music first always. That gives you a mood, and that can then guide where the lyric would take you. So converting them was relatively simple because I was already doing all the music and coming up with these different sort of thematic type sounds and structures. And then I have this story here, and you just have to take that and convert that into something lyrically that would suit that music. So it's just a transfer of ideas from one thing to another. But that's pretty much how I've gone about it always, really. You come up with some music that will give you a feeling, and then the words just tumble from that. It guides you completely.
So on one hand, you have stories that you're writing, so you, in some sense, you have the feeling that you're working on perhaps in another mode in writing, and then the music is sort of coming separately, but at some point they join. And I'm wondering if this sort of way in which you're writing stories, are you ever writing a story and thinking, oh, I've got a sound for that? Or you think you're thinking in sound and you say, oh, I've got a story for that?
It's more thinking sound first. Not 100%. You know, when you've been doing it for such a long time, then there will be times when it's one thing or the other. Sometimes it's a word will take you somewhere, but 95% of the time it always starts with sounds first. I used to spend weeks, before each album, I would spend weeks walking around with a recorder just trying to find sounds, noises, and I would hit things and drag things and rattle things and record everything, and then take that home and try to find a way of making that musical or manipulating it. I did a whole lot of stuff once where I would be whispering different words and phrases, and then put that in the machine and just start to turn that into other things. I love all that sort of thing. It's a bit geeky, but I do that less now, actually, than I used to. I think years ago I used to be more adventurous, experimental maybe than I am these days. That might be to do with having children. Well, I love them to bits, but before, in my life, before children, we had a different life, didn't we? So many ways different. But one of the things that we had a lot more of then was time. And so I had all the time in the world and no other pressures, or responsibilities. All the time in the world to just go in the studio and just spend all day again, and just coming up with stuff. Now, I actually don't want to. Now, if I'm not actually hard at it on a record, like I am, apart from this, in this particular period, I've left it too late to get it finished. Now I'm all under pressure and I'm panicking, and so all I'm doing is that. When I'm not doing that, I don't want to be in the studio with the children inside. I want to be with them, and I want to go out with them, and I want to have a life with them. They're soon enough. They're going to. Raven is now 16, so in a few years she's going to be gone, and it's all gone, and I don't want to waste any of it. I don't.
Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if we could think or talk a little bit about the ways in which you, as a part of a sort of reimagining of glam rock, I'm thinking more of like the makeup moment in synth pop, machine rock. Not sure what to call it now. So I'm wondering about that decision, because, and also whether this might be a UK-US thing, because for us in the US, it was still quite arresting to see men with makeup on, and also this otherworldliness of applying it all together.
The way I am there, that's a Mac man. That's a character from the story. It's actually a machine. You can't see on there, but you see the little symbol on the side there.
Yeah.
On the back sleeve of that, or one of the singles, there's an eye, but it has like a goat's pupil, and that was the only way that you could tell that they weren't human. So when I had a chance to actually go on stage with this or go on television with this, I just dressed up like the characters, and they had perfectly white skins, and I didn't. So I had to put makeup on and to make myself look like that. So that's how it started, just trying to be a living embodiment of what the stories were about and the characters within it. And then it just sort of grew from there, really. It became a thing. That's what you did.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to play just a little clip of our friends Electric, and I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that song, and especially the oddness of the song. How did it become a pop hit? And it's quite an odd song for a pop hit, and especially the talking bits.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just play a bit of that so we can all hear it.
So I found out no reason for the particles and smiles. And it hurts and I'm ugly, but I should never really try. I missed it tonight. So it's time to leave. You're seeing everything's new.
It was two songs to start with that I couldn't, two separate songs, and I couldn't figure out how to finish either of them. And then one day I was playing the main verse part, got stuck again, immediately started playing the other part, which is the talky bit, and thought, they go together. So I just stuck them together. So it became one long song. I was playing it back one day before I recorded it and hit a wrong note. I thought, that sounds better. So I kept the mistake. So it's a testament to poor songwriting. And it becomes this sort of classic, and you think, no, he doesn't deserve that at all, really. And it's actually about a robot prostitute. It's from this. And when it first came out, we got the chance to go on Top of the Pops with it. You're BBC, you can't have those sort of songs. And so he asked me what it was about, and I made up some rubbish, because I knew if I said it's about a robot prostitute, they wouldn't let us on. So I had to keep that quiet. And the talky bit's about some girl that broke my heart. In fact, I think it says, on the lyrics, it says the number 7, number 4, before each talky bit.
Yeah.
That's the alphabet, G and D. Her name was Gail Deal. So that's just about her. That was all. I wanted her to know that it was about her. So robot prostitute, spurned love. That's it.
All your Newman fans are, what do
And
those
the career
numbers
is
mean?
born. Yeah, if she hadn't have done that, if she hadn't have dumped me so horribly, then I might never have written that. I might wouldn't be here. I might never have had a career. You never know. You never know what's going to change your life, do you?
But I think the pairing is particularly expressive because you have that tension between the sort of emotionless android imagery and then this incredibly emotional talking moments where you say, this meant everything to me, this means nothing to you. You know, that's the part that I think really certainly hooked me, and I think so many fans. I mean, it became number 1 in Britain, which is...
Yeah, it's good. It surprised me, a lot of the criticism that it got at the time, which I have no chip on my shoulder about at all. I completely understand that people didn't like it, so that's okay. But a lot of the criticism about it was how cold it all was and how unfeeling it all was. And that surprised me because so much of it was exactly about how I was feeling and how bothered I was about my own life and things around me. But it seemed to be a really generic sort of criticism that people that didn't like electronic music would just throw out. That it was all made. I remember reading one thing that said, "Oh, it's all made by machines." You show me a machine that can do that in 1979. That would have been cool. No such thing. There was not machines that made it. It was all just. And the thing I thought, the thing with electronic music was if you played a guitar or drums or a piano, whatever, although with a guitar you could plug in some pedals and things, essentially it had its own sound. It was what it was. With the synthesizer, it's the only instrument where you can actually search for the very sound itself that expresses what you're trying to say. Not the melody, not the lyric, but the sound itself can create the atmosphere that you're after. And so in that respect, I always thought it was the most human instrument of all that there's ever been. You can't do that with a piano. It just sounds the way it sounds. You can't do that with trumpet or a cello or any of these things, these conventional instruments. Yeah, but with a synthesizer, you can get right in there and create the very, very mood that you're looking for. And to say that they're cold was just ignorance of a ridiculous level, I thought.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk, or ask you to talk about cars. I'll play a little bit, just so it's in the ear of people, and maybe you can tell the story of this massive global hit.
Right.
You knew it was coming, right? Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, it's written on a bass guitar. It's become this electronic classic, but didn't even write it on the keyboard. I've only written 2 songs on bass guitar, that one and another one that you've never heard of. So I'd been to London to buy a bass guitar because I wanted to learn to play bass better. I thought that might be useful. This was just after we'd done this record. Bought a thing called a Shergold modulator, which I still got, and got it home in my mum and dad's house. Went into this little side room that they've got, opened the case, picked it up, and the very, very first 4 notes went doo-doo-doo-doo. That was it. I thought, oh, that sounds all right. Do, 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 do. I mean, there are only 3 parts in it, do, 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 that bit, that middle bit. But all of those 3 parts, and to work them out how they were going to fit together, took about 10 minutes. And so musically, the song was done in 10 minutes. And I think the lyrics took another 10 or 20, because there's not much of them. It's almost an instrumental. Cars has got some singing in the first minute, and then it's an instrumental for the rest of it. So it's, there's not much going on, really. And then, and the lyrics are about, I nearly got beaten up in London once. I was in my car, and I must have done something, I don't know what, and then the people in front were angry with me, and they got out and they were trying to get me out of the car and, give me a thrashing. So I locked all my doors, and I'm terrified. And then I saw a gap on the pavement, actually, not in the road, and I went up on the pavement, and it was all very dramatic, and I got away, but it left its mark. I was terrified, and so that was. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but it must have been reasonably close to when I did it, because it was still the first thing that I wrote, when I started to write the lyric for that. So that was just about, being a victim of road rage, really, and how, beyond that, I suppose, how I, at that time, and still do actually, think of the car as being protection in the modern world, how it isolates you from the rest of humanity, and it can take you away from trouble and keep you safe from weather, from people. I have to this day, even in the morning, just going out to my car and getting in it, when the door closes, and I'm twice as comfortable as I was on walking to it. I've never lost that, so I still think of the car as my friend, my shield in the world. And as far as recording it goes, not much to say, really. It's dead simple. The only thing that I think we were talking about this earlier, the keyboard line at the beginning, the big high string line that comes in, it stays there for an unusually long time. And the reason for that is not any sort of inventiveness on my part. I put my finger on the key, and then I didn't know what to do. I hadn't worked out a part for it. So I just left it while I tried to think of something. I've got no idea. Nothing came to mind. So I just hit some notes in disgust, actually. I couldn't, walked away and thought, that sounded all right, that. And it was a that bit. And then I had to try and figure out what it was I'd done. Well, that's it. So that's probably one of the most memorable parts of the song. Absolute Accident. Another classic. Yes. So it's not because you're clever. It's not. And it's not at all. It's being able to spot an accident when it stares you in the face as being something useful. Mm. And I have genuinely spent my whole career relying on the fact that if I stumble about enough, then these accidents will happen, and I'll probably spot them, and then I can use them. And that's why why I feel slightly uneasy doing things like this, because I don't feel clever or talented in any way at all. I feel incredibly lucky that those things happened. Because if that hadn't have happened, and that was nothing to do with me being innovative or any of that, nothing at all. I'm just sitting there, and I couldn't think of anything. How does that make you clever? I couldn't think of anything, and that's how the accident happened. I could tell you 1,001 stories like that. Mm. So I look at people that I genuinely admire, because I think they do things like that on purpose. And that's clever,
Can you say something about the Vox Humana? Because it really permeates the Pleasure Principle album. It's the dominant sound on that album. And It is such a unique sound, and we were talking earlier how it's only available on the Polymoog 280A. And you can go up online and try to find all these different kind of recipes to try to recreate that sound, but you created a whole sound, a whole album using that sound, and it's not monotonous. It doesn't get tiring. You sort of pulled out all the expressive possibilities of that sound. So can you speak to what that sound, how did it captivate you, and why? What did you hear in it?
It sounded to me, it was hugely emotional. It sounded like something crying for help. It sounded like a call. And it's also incredibly filling as a sound. It just fills up the whole picture. You don't need a whole lot going on around it. So providing you can find the right tunes melodies that will allow it to breathe somewhat, because it's not a rapid sound, then it just sings. It's just, I mean, whoever programmed, and we tweaked it slightly, but not much. It was an absolutely beautiful sound straight out the box. So whoever worked at Moog, who came up with that, genius.
Yeah.
It's an incredible sound.
And you don't use the Polymoog in performance anymore, the 280A? Or do you?
No, I'm one of those people that says you can get close to it. That's, but it's that to tour with a Polymoog in '79 when they were still quite new.
Yeah.
They were a nightmare. They were problematic machines to try to keep running with the rigors of being on the road, in and out of trucks, and different temperatures, and they were just troublesome. So we moved away from them as soon as we could. And to be fair, in a live situation, that it's not as if you're listening on headphones. You're in a high fidelity room, so if you can get that close, it's good enough. Yeah. And you can get that close by things that will carry on working and not break down. Then it makes it, it's a factor. You have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. I'm going to play a video clip. I have to exit my PowerPoint here. And this is your Saturday Night Live performance. It's not of Cars. This is the second song that you played, which is Praying to the Aliens from the Replicas album. And I'm going to play this for two reasons, partly because it's quite something that they put subtitles underneath while you were singing, and I want to think about that a little bit with you, but also because it's such a great show of all the gear that you had and playing it in a live performance very, very early on. So I know you're not fond of this, but here we go.
I'm praying to the aliens. I'm
saw that on Saturday Night Live, it was, for me, revolutionary. I mean, first of all, it was such an interesting follow-up to Cars because it presented this completely alien figure. And even the movements you had were, I mean, I felt they were so elegant and subtle. So I'm sort of wondering about your decision to play this as the second song, especially because for the U.S. audience and the words that are very sort of upfront with sort of homoeroticism, was this a bit of sort of rebelliousness on your part, or part of a sense of the character you were thinking of portraying to the U.S. audience? I'm curious about this because for me it was a really mind-blowing performance. I mean, I loved it. So.
I thought it was a mistake, actually.
It was a mistake, Ellen.
Well, no, I honestly don't remember why I did it. Whatever the thinking was at the time, it's long lost to me now. But I think looking back on it, although what you're saying would seem to say, well, it's a good thing to do, a good choice of song. But I probably should have. There's another song on that album called Metal that probably would have been more popular, a bit more vibey than that one. So I honestly don't know. I mean, I if I had my chance to do that again, then I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it?
I'd do something else. Yeah, that just seems a bit of a weird one to me. But I'm 62 now. I was 21 then, and you think differently, don't you? You know, the things that you're trying to present, the things that you're trying to say, the feelings you have about the music that you're doing, everything changes over time. I had no experience then. You know, maybe it was just about I just liked that song. It might have been the last song that I recorded. Sorry, that was from the album before, actually, not from Pleasure Principle. But I honestly don't know. It could have been as simple as that. I just thought that was my favourite song at the moment. The songs that you like and dislike evolve over time. You know, I look back at songs now that I was really happy with when I wrote them, and wouldn't dream of playing live now. And again, not so much about my stuff. Things that I was less keen on when I wrote it, they never got any better. But there are definitely songs of other people's that I wasn't that keen about when I first heard them that really grew on me over time. So the way you feel about music does change, even your own stuff. Yeah. It does change over time. But considering how big an opportunity Saturday Night Live is, and I didn't realise until not that long before that it actually went out live. I was used to Top of the Pops where you pretend it's live, And it's actually live. You're actually going to be playing, and there's 50 million people watching it. I'd only been on telly twice before that, So I was completely blown away and intimidated and terrified of the whole thing. So to do that song, that's a brave step, actually.
It was, and believe me, for a young queer suburbanite like myself, it was totally transformative. So I thank you for that.
Well, I'm glad it worked. Thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about metal, since you brought it up. That's a song that you've revisited. In fact, other people have caught on to that particular song in Pleasure Principle. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful, supple melody. And I wanted to ask you about your revisiting of that song in the song Moral from Dance. And I'll play just a little bit of that song so we have it in our ears, what the transformation of metal is for you. And that was Roger Taylor on the drums, right? From Queen.
Yeah.
So maybe you can also talk to how you met up with Roger Taylor and got him to play some drums on your album, and then also thinking about why did you come back to this song and rethink it in that way?
Okay. Well, the Roger Taylor thing, I'd met him once. I did a radio show where you had to review records and say what you think. I met him then once, and then a while later, I used to know that band Japan quite well. I was sort of friends, I thought, with them, and they invited me to go to Japan with them and do a little guest spot. So I end up in Tokyo on my own, and no contact from them. So I sort of tracked them down, found out what hotel they were in, went to meet them, and it was just a bit weird, you know. And then I saw him running out of a side door and getting in the car and fucking off. What's that all about? So I jumped in the cab, chased them to the station, got on a train, bought my own ticket, got on a train. I'm like a groupie. End up in Osaka, I think, some other city in Japan, get to the gig, go at the front, and then wait for them to call me to come and do the sound check. They never did. So then all the audience starts coming in, and it was only then, because I'm a bit slow, that I thought, they've gone off the idea. And no one had the bottle to tell me, had the courage to tell me. So now I'm in Japan. I'm clearly not talking to them. So I go back to Tokyo, and I see a poster that Queen are playing at the Budokan, this big arena. So although I'd met Roger Taylor once, I couldn't say I knew him, you know, properly. So I bought a ticket, and went and sat in the audience again just to watch a Queen gig, because I was a Queen fan. And then there was this big fuss started, and I was trying to figure out what it was, and it was me. I didn't know anyone knew me there, so anyway, then I got rescued by security, and they took me around backstage, and I sort of got adopted by Queen.
It's not bad.
Oh, it's great, and what happened? Oh yeah, and then they did the gig, and that was brilliant. Then after the gig, they went out to some after-show gathering thing in a sushi place, and they took me with them, you know, this little lost boy, you know, and we ended up in this sushi place, which I don't like, but I was just so pleased to be there. So I'm just sitting down, minding my own business, and Freddie Mercury came over and said, you know, you're all right, you're not eating. I said, I'm all right, Fred. I'm really happy to be here. Don't worry about me. You know, brilliant. I'm hanging out with Queen. This is pretty cool. You know, and then, but he wasn't having that, and he had a word with the restaurant owner to make sure that it was cool, and then sent his limo driver off to get me a McDonald's, and so I ended up sitting in a sushi restaurant in Tokyo eating McDonald's with Queen. Brilliant. And I thought, you know, so you got that band Japan being all stupid and childish and pathetic and gutless. And then you got this mega band who were just being the loveliest people, you know, looking after me. And I thought, what a difference, man. Anyway, so I got to know Roger Taylor better because of that. And then back in England, I was working on some of the tunes from that record. And he just came to visit, hang out in the studio. He was brilliant, actually. My brother was a drummer. My brother's younger than me, but at the time he was a drummer. And he was doing a show in a show. He was doing a gig in some little pub up the road, you know, with about 20 people in it. And Roger said, let's go and watch him. So my brother's sitting there playing drummers, and then at the back he noticed that Roger Taylor and me from Queen walk in. Really, he was great. So down to earth and lovely. You learn a lot of lessons from people that are that big and so lovely. Still, just nice, normal people. You know, you can just chat to them, and it was just great. Now you got some people that just think they're God's gift to music because they're so 10 records. And then you've got people like them who are legends and are just so cool with it. So, lessons learned.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the question? Why was he on the Why was he on the record? Oh, because he came to the studio and I was doing that one, and he said, you could put some toms on that. Oh, all right then, go for it. So he just set up these toms and just went for it. One take, I think, just blitzed through the song and it was great.
Yeah. And you decided to slow that song way down and give it this kind of really hard, sludgy beat, which is something that you have sort of adopted in a lot of your newer music, this really sort of deep, rich, slower beat sound. And I sort of hear it in this particular example early on.
Yeah, I call it doomsteady. It is doomsteady. That's what
The doomsday.
I've got 3 doomsteadies on this record. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not very good at writing things that go quickly. I'm much better at things that are much of a slower pace. I seem to, the way I write, the way I sing, it seems to work better at more medium sort of tempos. I'm just more comfortable there. I try to write more up tempo. I think Cars are probably one of the most poppy things I've ever written. That was I think me and pop music accidentally collided for one brief moment, which was Cars. And in pop music carried on going in its direction, and I carried on going somewhere else. I'm not really very good at it, to be honest. I don't think I can write popular music. I think too heavily. I don't explain it very well, but I'm just not suited for that sort of middle of the road, easy listening sort of pop music stuff.
And with that in mind, I'm going to switch again and jump ahead to recent days. I'm going to play a clip of you and the Scaparous Orchestra. This is one of those recent, it's a 2019, this particular recording and DVD.
Yeah, November. Was it 19 or 18? 18, we did it. I think it came out in 19.
So can you speak to de-electrifying your music? What was it like to work with an orchestra? And this is a young orchestra, young conservatory, sort of college-age kids.
From
so
Manchester.
What was that experience like? And thinking through your music, which had come out already on album and was doing very, very well, and to reconceive this and some of your classic electronic hits in this mode.
Well, if you take something like films that you mentioned at the beginning, it has essentially it's just full of string parts played on the synthesizer, but it's serving a function of what strings would do on that particular song. So you find the songs that you feel would translate to conventional instrumentation. But a lot of the work was done by Simon Robertshaw, who was the conductor, and his friend, another Simon, who did the orchestrations. So I would tell them what songs I wanted. I was only allowed to have 15 because of the time it took to do it and then to actually score it all out. So there was a limit. Finding the right songs, ones that had a particular cinematic feel would be preferable. So there were certain guidelines as to what would help you pick the right songs, and then he would orchestrate them. Most of the time, it was fantastic, brilliant, straight away. Some of them, I felt he just didn't get it quite right, or lost the essence of what the song was. But rarely, and they were quickly fixed. So tremendous credit to him for the way he was able to take these electronic things and convert them in a way that was seamless. You know, we only had 1 day of rehearsal with the actual orchestra. They had a few days on their own, and we had a few days on our own as a band, and then we met for 1 day, which was a bit daunting, to be honest, in case there were problems, you know. But it was just an incredible experience. I've often thought that people like me, at my sort of level, doing what I do, when you work with an orchestra, it's always felt a little bit like it's you know, a desperate stab at some sort of validation, I guess. And I've seen other people do it, and I've always enjoyed what they do, but I've wanted to do it many times myself, and just always backed out because it just felt. It's that thing about confidence, you know. I just didn't feel that I was good enough to have an orchestra playing. I didn't think the songs were worthy. I didn't think I was worthy of it. But Simon was a really big fan, and he did one thing as a demo for me. He said, look, it can sound like this. One of the songs from Savage, from the last album. And it literally, I actually saw the hairs on my arm come up. I was with Gemma when we heard it for the first time, a song called, I can't remember what it was now, anyway. But it was phenomenal, and I was really proud. I thought, I couldn't imagine that my little songs could sound that epic, you know. And so it was that made me go for it, and I'm really glad I did. It was the best thing, one of the best experiences I've ever had, and it was, you know, when you I work on my own. I've aid Fenton who produces the stuff, but we don't work together. We work in different countries, so I work on my own, and I have been riddled with a lack of confidence from day one that's never gone away. Every time I start a new album, I'm anxious and I'm worried and I'm terrified that I'm not going to be able to come up with anything, and it haunts you. You know, those periods that you go through where you have struggled a little bit, they haunt you. And self-confidence is such an important part of what you do, to be able to play something and decide whether is that good enough or not. And it's like walking on a knife edge. You know, if you do something and it's not quite right, and then fairly soon after that you don't come up with something that is quite right, you feel your confidence begin to drain. It's like you're wobbling up the side. And if you go, then you're lost. I mean, I had a period in the early 90s where I think it must have been 2 years. I erased every single thing I did for 2 years because I was so down about what I was doing. I couldn't see it, hear it clearly. And so I live like that. I'm doing it now. You know, I just been, before I left to come here yesterday, I was trying to get this latest song finished, and I said to Gemma, I've written 18 choruses for this song. 18. Can't, because none of them seem quite right. Yeah, and you just feel that you must be able to do better than that, and that's common. And so when you come from that background of insecurity and not, it doesn't matter whether you've had #1 records or not. It doesn't matter what you read about yourself. When I'm in the room, I'm frightened and I'm terrified, you know, that I'm not going to come up with things, and I get really difficult to live with, and she calls me preoccupied, because my mind is somewhere else all the time when I don't sleep. And I've been doing this my whole life, and it's probably worse now than it's ever been. It doesn't get any better. So when you write what to me always seem like little songs, and then you've got this big orchestra playing them, and now they actually sound like proper songs, you know, it's a lovely feeling, lovely. And I didn't expect that, to be honest. I thought I'd be slightly embarrassed and humiliated by the whole thing, but I absolutely loved it.
Brilliant. Well, I want to play one final clip, And this is interesting that you're talking about self-confidence, because this clip is about you being completely confident, I believe.
Oh, airplanes.
This is your other life as a stunt pilot.
See him?
Which one are you?
I'm in that one.
This one?
That's me.
In the W.
That's my friend. He was killed
No.
soon after this session.
Airborne, and weeks and months of meticulous planning and practice bear fruit. Gary and Norman unleash the power of these two wartime veterans and roar into the sky. The radial pair.
I bow down. So can you tell us a little bit about this part of your life? I mean, it was something you were doing while you were making music and in between albums and tours and...
Yeah, I did air display flying for 12 years, 15 years. Only in World War II airplanes. We used to fly those. There were 5 of us in that team, actually. That was me and Norman had an offshoot, the 2-ship that we did. And of the 5 original people in it, I think 6 people, sorry, in the original one, and 4 of them were killed in different accidents. Norman was killed shortly after that was filmed in a different aeroplane. But it's so exciting. You know, when the thing about music is there is no yardstick. You can't measure it by success. Opinions come and go. Some love an album, some hate an album. So there's no measure of quality or ability, or there's just opinion. The thing I loved about flying was it's nothing but yardsticks and measures. If you can fly that plane, you're pretty good. If you can do all that stuff with it, you're really pretty good. There's no arguing with that. Anyone that knows about airplanes knows about these things. And so there was a measure. And so there was a satisfaction that come from that, a feeling of accomplishment, of ability, of self-esteem that come from doing that I've never got from music. Never come close to it from music. In music, if you make a mistake, like if you're on stage and you fall over, you get embarrassed. That's the worst thing that can happen. You make a mistake in that and you're dead. Yeah. You're this close to the ground and you're doing ridiculous speeds, and then you're upside down and your face is coming off. It's just amazing. And you're part of a very, very small group of people that can do it. There's only a handful, 40 or 50 pilots in Britain at any one time that are doing that sort of thing. So you're part of an elite and you're trusted. People trust you with their lives, that you're not going to fly them into the ground and you're not going to hit them. We're flying 4 feet apart, upside down at some point. That's pretty cool stuff to be doing. And that was happening as my music career was collapsing. And so I'd done really well with music. And then it all started to go wrong, and it just went downhill for, I don't know, 10 years. Just kept on getting worse and worse and worse until I thought I was finished. 92, 93, when we met, I was done. You know, I couldn't, I had no record deal. No one was coming to the concerts. I wasn't selling any records. I was massively in debt, about $1 million. It was £600,000, which at the time was about $1 million in debt, and nothing going on that was ever going to pay that back. So it was desperate. The only reason I could have an aeroplane and keep it was because I used to get paid for air shows, and so it was just enough to the aeroplane paid for itself. And so I was able to do that even though I was broke, which was weird. But the thing is that the thing that was so good about that for me up here was, whereas the music business was collapsing and every ounce of self-esteem is being sucked out of you, so that what was the balance. That was bringing it all back in a completely different way. And I was really proud of myself and really happy with what I was doing, and had friendships, and I was part of something in a way that I never had been in the music business. And it wasn't just a fantastic thing to do, it served a very, very important function in that part of my life. And then it kept me sane while this was all going horribly wrong. And then that weathered. So many people were killed. When I first met Gemma, she came to my house, and I took her around the house, and I didn't have anything musical in there at all. It's just all photographs of my aeroplane life, and every single photograph, I said, well, that's this man, that man, he's dead. And what, those two are dead. And at the end of it, she said to me, you didn't show me one single photograph where everybody's still alive in it. And that struck home a little bit. I think it is quite dangerous, this, you know. I hadn't really thought much about it before. Anyway, then we obviously stayed together. But then I noticed every year 4 or 5 people would be killed. My brother had a really bad crash, but didn't die, but had a really bad crash. The man that taught me aerobatics, he was killed. It just kept on going. And eventually when Norman, my friend here, he was my closest friend in it, when he was killed, that really upset Gemma. That was the one that she was close to as well. And at that point, all support from home just vanished. You know, one too many, and we were really getting close by then. You know, and we were obviously going to stay together, and it struck me that it must be horrible to be a partner of someone that does that, where you're just terrified every weekend that they might not come back. And that was enough for me to think, maybe I should think again about this. And so that was there maybe it's enough, time enough. I'd done it a long time and got away. I had some moments with it, but I'd one catch fire once and stuff like that. But I read an article when I very first started doing display flying. I read an article by a man called Brian Lacombe. He was a brilliant display pilot, and he said, when you do this sort of thing, if the day ever comes when you're not absolutely 100% sure that you're going to get through with the manoeuvre out the other end, he said that's the time to stop. And that happened. I was diving in for one particular thing, only practicing, not a display, and I pulled up and got to about there, where you're committed, and thought, I hope I got that right. I'm not 100% sure I got that right on the way in. And that's a fear. That's a proper terror when you think, you actually, in the next 5 or 6 seconds, you're either going to die or you're not, And I got it perfectly right, actually. But that fear, that lack of confidence, to do that, you have to be confident to the point of arrogance, that you know exactly what you're doing and that you will not make a mistake, because you can't have that doubt when you're doing it. And as soon as that doubt appears, then you should get out. And I did. That was me done. I got out of it. We were talking about having children, and in fact, I think we started trying to have children at that point, and I thought that's no life. But my recklessness, if you like, with my own life is one thing, but it's completely unacceptable if you're married and if you've got children. And so I grew up, really. I just grew up and I realised that was for another time. So soon after that, I got out of it. And by then, the music career was doing better. I just slid back into that.
So you completed the...
Did a loop, yeah. Yeah.
I see we're out of time. I want to say one more thing to you, which is happy birthday on Sunday. I have a little bag. The only proper gift here is a Cornell t-shirt. It's the most goth Cornell t-shirt I could find. Right. So that's one. And then another one, which is just for this exhibit.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for that.
It was good. Yes, please.